I had spent years mastering the art of being the perfect wife. I knew when to smile, when to listen, when to stroke Lucas's ego just enough to keep him feeling like the center of the universe. Our marriage looked flawless from the outside, polished, effortless, the kind of love people envied. But perfection is a fragile thing. It shatters so easily. And all it took was one careless mistake. It happened on an ordinary night. Lucas had left his phone on our nightstand, face up, unlocked. A soft vibration caught my eye. A message. I wouldn't have checked if I hadn't seen the name, Camilla. A name I didn't recognize. And then, just like that, everything changed. I opened the thread. My hands didn't even shake. I read every word, every promise, every filthy detail. His lies were laid out in neat little rows, as casual as a grocery list. Love you, baby. Can't wait to see you again. Can't stop thinking about last night. I felt the shift before I even fully processed it, the slow, creeping clarity of betrayal. A weaker woman might have cried, might have woken him up right then and there, demanded answers, thrown the phone in his face. But I wasn't weak. I sat there in the dim glow of the screen, my mind already working through the next move. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want a pathetic excuse. I wanted something else, something colder, a lesson he would never forget. And then it came to me, the perfect stage, the perfect audience. Lucas's family dinner was just days away. His parents, his siblings, his closest friends, a room full of people who thought he was a devoted husband, a respectable man. He'd expect me to be at his side, like always, smiling, supporting, playing my role. But this time, I had a new role to play. And Lucas? He had no idea he was about to become the main act in a spectacle he would never recover from. I spent the next few days watching him, really watching him. The way he kissed my cheek absent-mindedly in the morning, the way he scrolled through his phone at night, smiling at messages I wasn't supposed to see. The arrogance of it all was almost impressive. He had no idea that I had already decided how this story would end. No idea that I was memorizing every single detail, filing it away for the moment I would dismantle his perfect little world. I didn't rush. No, I let it build. I laughed at his jokes. I let him kiss me. I played my part so well he never even noticed the shift. That's the thing about men like Lucas. They assume they're untouchable. They assume that as long as they say the right things, put on the right performance, their sins will stay hidden. But I knew better. And I was going to prove just how wrong he was. The family dinner was the perfect setting. Lucas thrived in that environment, basking in the glow of his parents' admiration, soaking up the praise from his siblings. He would walk in with his arm around me, confident, certain of his place in the world. He would raise his glass when it was time for the toast, expecting some sweet, loving tribute from the wife who had always stood by his side. And that's when I would strike. I could already see it. The way his smile would falter, the way his grip on the stem of his wine glass would tighten, the hush that would fall over the table as realization dawned, the delicious, inevitable unraveling of the man who thought he had everything under control. I could already picture the moment in perfect detail. The clinking of glasses, the low hum of conversation, the warm glow of candlelight reflecting off polished silverware. Lucas, seated at the head of the table, laughing, charming, oblivious. His mother's proud smile, his father's approving nod. He had everyone fooled. Everyone except me. And when the time came, when the room quieted for my toast, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd lift my glass just as he expected. I'd clear my throat just as he expected. But instead of a speech about love and devotion, I'd begin reading. His words, his messages, every dirty, deceitful, stomach-turning line, word for word. Loud and clear. I imagined the silence stretching long and heavy after the first few sentences. The way his mother's face would fall, how his father's jaw would tighten, his siblings exchanging sharp, stunned glances. The way Lucas's entire body would stiffen, his fingers curling into fists beneath the table. He'd try to stop me, maybe reach for my hand, maybe stammer out a denial. But there would be no escape. Not this time. The thought sent a slow, satisfied warmth through me. He had taken something from me, the security of our marriage, the trust I had once placed in him, and now I would take something from him, his pride, his reputation, his carefully constructed facade. This wouldn't be a fight behind closed doors. This would be a reckoning, a lesson. And when it was over, when the damage was done, I'd walk away, head held high, unapologetic, free. The restaurant was buzzing with conversation, the clinking of cutlery, the occasional burst of laughter. It was exactly the kind of setting Lucas loved. Warm, elegant, filled with people who admired him. He slid effortlessly into his role, greeting everyone with easy confidence, playing the devoted husband, the charming son, the golden child. And I played my role just as well. I smiled when I was supposed to. I answered questions, engaged in small talk, let my fingers brush against his like we were still the perfect couple. If anyone looked at us, they'd see a woman who adored her husband, a wife who was proud to be by his side, and that was exactly what I wanted them to see, because the best betrayals don't come from rage or chaos. They come from calm, from precision, from the kind of deception so seamless it feels like the truth. Lucas had no idea what was coming. None. He was too comfortable, too secure in the life he'd built on lies. As he leaned back in his chair, arm draped lazily over mine, I studied his face, the sharp lines of his jaw, the confident smirk he wore so effortlessly. He thought he was untouchable. But the stage was set, the audience was in place, and soon the performance would begin. The wine flowed freely, laughter rising and falling in waves around the table. Lucas was in his element, basking in the warmth of his family's admiration, soaking up every glance of approval. His mother beamed at him. His father nodded with that quiet pride he always reserved for his eldest son. Even his siblings, usually quick with sarcastic jabs, seemed content to let him revel in the moment. And I let him have it, for now. I played my part flawlessly, leaning into his touch, responding at just the right moments. I let my gaze linger on him with the practiced ease of a woman who loved her husband. And maybe, once, I really did. But love and admiration had long since been replaced by something else, something sharper, something colder. Then, like clockwork, the moment arrived. The conversation lulled just enough for the next tradition of the evening, the toast. Lucas's father lifted his glass first, speaking of family, of love, of loyalty. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. Loyalty. The irony of it almost made me laugh. Lucas turned to me, expectant, his smile easy and confident. He was waiting for me to follow tradition, to stand, to say something sweet, something devoted, to lift him up in front of everyone, and I would, just not in the way he expected. I pushed back my chair slightly, feeling the weight of every gaze settle on me. Lucas's hand brushed against mine, a silent cue, a reminder of the role I was meant to play. I met his eyes, holding his gaze just long enough for a flicker of confusion to cross his face. Then, with a slow inhale, I rose to my feet, lifting my glass. Smiles turned toward me, warm and expectant. Lucas's mother clasped her hands together, already assuming I'd say something heartfelt, something that painted our marriage as the kind of love people envied. Even Lucas looked relaxed, certain of what was coming. He truly believed he had me, that he had won, that I was still the woman who would protect his image, his secrets. I let the moment stretch, let the silence settle just enough to make them lean in. Then, with a small smile, I cleared my throat. I wasn't sure what to say tonight, I began, my voice smooth, steady. I wanted my words to mean something, to truly capture what Lucas and I share. I shifted my gaze to him, watching as his smirk grew. Good. Let him feel safe. Let him believe, for just one more second, that he was in control. Then, with deliberate ease, I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. A second later, his own words filled the space between us. The messages, the betrayal, line after filthy line, read aloud with absolute clarity. And just like that, the perfect illusion shattered. The first few words barely registered. A chuckle from one of Lucas's brothers, a tilt of his mother's head, the briefest flicker of confusion in my husband's eyes. But then, as the words sank in, as the weight of them settled over the table, the room shifted. Forks stilled against plates. Wine glasses paused midair. The atmosphere, once lively and warm, grew thick, suffocating. I kept reading. My voice was calm, unwavering, as if I were reciting a love letter rather than exposing a web of deceit. Miss you already, baby. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to taste you again. A gasp. Someone sucked in a sharp breath. Lucas stiffened beside me, the color draining from his face. Wish I could be inside you right now. You drive me crazy. A choked noise from across the table. His mother, maybe. I didn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Lucas's hand shot out, fingers wrapping around my wrist in a silent plea. Isabella, he hissed, low, urgent. His voice was thick with panic, but I only pulled my arm free and met his gaze with a smile, soft, almost pitying. What's wrong, love? I asked sweetly. Don't like hearing your own words? The tension snapped. His father pushed back his chair with a scrape, the deep creases in his forehead carving deeper. His mother covered her mouth with a trembling hand, eyes wide, disbelieving. Across the table, his sister muttered something under her breath, shaking her head. And Lucas? He was unraveling, right there in front of everyone. Lucas reached for my phone, his movements jerky, desperate, but I was faster. I pulled it back just in time, holding it up like a prize, my grip firm, my stance unwavering. No, you don't get to run from this, I murmured, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Not after everything. My voice was still smooth, still controlled. I refused to let him steal this moment from me. His father's knuckles were white against the table, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might break a tooth. His mother blinked rapidly as if trying to wake from a nightmare. Someone let out a low whistle. His younger brother, maybe, half amused, half horrified. A reaction I had anticipated. But I wasn't doing this for shock value. No, this was for me. For every lie, every betrayal, every time he made me doubt my own instincts. Lucas tried again, leaning in this time, his voice low, pleading. Isabella, please, not here, he begged, his breath shaky. The mighty, confident Lucas was slipping, unraveling. He wasn't the charmer now, wasn't the golden son, the adored husband. He was a man exposed, stripped of his carefully built facade, left raw and panicked under the weight of his own sins. I met his eyes, unflinching, and then, with a delicate tilt of my head, I delivered the final blow. But why, darling? I asked, feigning innocence. I thought we shared everything. And with that, I scrolled to another message, one even worse, one that would make the first set look like child's play. And then I kept reading. I barely made it through the next message before his mother let out a strangled gasp, her trembling hand pressing to her chest like she physically couldn't bear it. Lucas's father exhaled sharply, shaking his head, his expression carved from stone. Across the table, his sister turned away, muttering, Jesus Christ, under her breath. His younger brother stifled a laugh, because the absurdity of it all, the sheer recklessness of Lucas's betrayal, was almost comedic. But Lucas wasn't laughing. His hands were balled into fists, his jaw so tight I thought he might shatter his own teeth. Isabella, stop, he hissed, his voice raw with desperation. Please. He reached for me again, but this time I took a deliberate step back, putting just enough space between us to make it clear. He had lost all power over me. I looked at him for a long moment, taking in every detail, the way his confidence had drained, the way his carefully constructed world was collapsing around him, brick by miserable brick. And then, with the kind of slow, deliberate clarity that makes time feel heavy, I lifted my glass. To Lucas, I said, letting the words settle over the stunned silence. May he find the loyalty he never gave. I tipped my head back, downed the last sip of my drink, and set my glass on the table with a quiet, decisive clink. Then, without another word, I turned on my heel and walked away, feeling every single pair of eyes on my back. Behind me, Lucas's world was crumbling, and in front of me, freedom. I didn't rush. I wanted him to feel every second of it, the weight of my absence, the power shift, the suffocating silence I left in my wake. My heels clicked against the polished floor, steady, deliberate, as I wove through the stunned diners, past waiters frozen mid-step, past conversations that had dwindled into murmurs and stolen glances. Behind me, I heard Lucas stumble to his feet. "Isabella!" His voice cracked, raw with panic. He wasn't used to losing control, wasn't used to being the one left behind. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. If I had, I would have seen the full extent of his ruin, his parents' disgust, his siblings' contempt, his friends shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to pity him or distance themselves completely. I made it to the exit just as the cool night air swept over me, clearing the last traces of that room from my skin. My hands weren't shaking. My breath wasn't uneven. I had done exactly what I had come to do. The weight I had carried for so long, the invisible burden of every lie, every deceitful touch, every whispered excuse, it was gone. A valet glanced at me, his brows raised slightly, as if sensing the storm I had just walked away from. I gave him a small, serene smile. "My car, please," I said, my voice steady. He nodded quickly, hurrying off. Behind me, the restaurant doors slammed open, and I knew, Lucas was coming after me. His footsteps were hurried, uneven. He was unraveling, and for the first time, I had the pleasure of watching it happen. "Isabella, wait!" Lucas's voice cut through the night air, hoarse, desperate. I didn't turn around. I let him chase me, let him feel, for once, what it was like to be the one left behind. By the time he reached me, his breath was ragged, his carefully composed exterior in shambles. "Please," he panted, reaching for my arm like he still had the right. I stepped back before his fingers could touch me, tilting my head slightly as I regarded him. Really regarded him. He looked smaller now, his suit rumpled, his face pale under the glow of the streetlights. This wasn't the man who had strutted into dinner with unwavering confidence. This was something else entirely, something pathetic. "I can explain," he rushed out, his voice thick with desperation. It's not what you think. You don't understand." I let out a small laugh, cold, amused. "Oh, Lucas," I murmured, shaking my head. "That's the thing. I understand perfectly." The valet pulled up then, the low hum of my car's engine filling the silence between us. I reached into my purse and pulled out one last gift, something I had been saving for this very moment. With slow, deliberate precision, I held out the envelope and dropped it into his trembling hands. His brow furrowed. "What is this?" I met his eyes, calm, collected, untouchable. "Divorce papers," I said simply. Lucas stared at the envelope as if it might catch fire in his hands. His fingers hovered over the seal, reluctant to open it, as if delaying the inevitable could somehow undo what had already been set in motion. "Isabella," he whispered, my name a broken plea on his lips. "We can fix this. No," I cut him off, my voice firm, steady. "You broke this, and now you get to live with it." There was no room for negotiation, no space for apologies or empty words. I had spent enough time drowning in his lies. Tonight, I had given him exactly what he deserved, a reckoning, and I would not be dragged back into the wreckage. I turned toward the car, but before I could slip inside, I gave him one last look. Not out of longing, not out of regret, but to memorize this moment, the way his shoulders sagged, the way his eyes brimmed with something that might have been remorse. It didn't matter anymore. The man I once loved no longer existed. Maybe he never had. I stepped into the car, shutting the door between us, severing the last remaining thread. As the engine hummed beneath me, I rolled down the window just slightly. "Oh, and Lucas," I called out, watching as his head snapped up. Next time you cheat, try not to leave a paper trail. Then, with a final, satisfied smile, I let the driver pull away, leaving him standing there, alone, defeated, drowning in the consequences of his own choices. And for the first time in years, I felt weightless. I woke up the next morning to silence. No lingering scent of Lucas's cologne in the air, no sound of his footsteps shuffling through the house, no empty small talk over coffee. Just quiet, peace. It stretched through the walls, settled into my bones, wrapped itself around me like a long overdue embrace. The house felt different now, lighter, as if his absence had taken all the heaviness with it. I moved through the space with an unfamiliar sense of freedom, no longer carrying the weight of pretending, of overlooking, of swallowing my instincts for the sake of keeping up appearances. The illusion was gone, and in its place, there was something real. Something mine. I took my time that morning, a long shower, steam curling around me as I scrubbed away every last trace of him. I made my own breakfast, no more preparing his coffee just the way he liked it, no more setting out a plate for a man who had taken me for granted. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, relishing the simplicity of putting myself first. My phone buzzed on the table. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Lucas, no doubt. Maybe an apology, maybe another pathetic excuse. Or maybe just desperation, the sinking realization that he had lost something he would never get back. I let it vibrate, untouched, unread. Then, without hesitation, I picked it up, swiped to delete, and smiled. By midday, the messages had piled up. A mix of guilt, regret, and pathetic justifications. We need to talk. Please, just once. Followed by, it wasn't what you think. You're blowing this out of proportion. And then, predictably, you'll regret this, Isabella. Ah, there it was. The last resort of a man with no cards left to play. I leaned back in my chair, sipping a fresh cup of coffee, unfazed. Lucas thought he still had power over me, that I'd fall back into old habits, answer his calls, let him weave his way back in with smooth words and empty promises. Not this time. I had spent too many years excusing his behavior, convincing myself that love was sacrifice, that marriage was endurance. But love wasn't supposed to be exhaustion. It wasn't supposed to be suspicion or doubt or the gut-wrenching ache of knowing you're second to someone else. My phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't Lucas. A message from his sister. I can't believe he did this. I'm so sorry, Isabella. You deserved better. And then another, from one of his closest friends. I never thought I'd see him break like that. You were incredible last night. I smirked, tapping out a quick, polite response before setting my phone down. It was funny in a way. Lucas had spent so long building his image, crafting this illusion of the perfect husband, the perfect man. And in a single night, I had burned it all to the ground. And the best part? I felt nothing for him anymore. No anger, no sadness, just relief. A quiet, liberating sort of freedom. That evening, I found myself at a rooftop bar, bathed in the soft glow of city lights. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of something new, possibility. I swirled the champagne in my glass, watching the golden liquid catch the light, feeling the weight of nothing pressing down on me for the first time in years. No guilt, no second-guessing, no sinking feeling in my stomach every time Lucas's phone buzzed. As if on cue, my phone vibrated again. I glanced at it, expecting yet another desperate attempt from him. But this time it was different. A final message, simple, hollow. I don't know how to fix this. I took my time before responding, letting the moment stretch. Then, finally, I typed out 2 words. You don't. And before I could second-guess myself, before nostalgia or habit could try to soften me, I hit block. The bartender passed by, offering me a refill. I smiled, tilting my glass toward him. Actually, I said, my voice lighter than it had been in years, I'll have another. Because tonight, for the first time in a long time, I was toasting to myself.